Welcome to Lessons in Dyslexic Thinking, conversations with the world's most inspiring dyslexics, where we find out what dyslexic thinking is and how each of us can employ it to change the world. Today, I'm joined by Josh Turner, the incredible social entrepreneur and founder of Stand4 Socks, the company that donates a pair of socks to a homeless person for every pair sold. So far, you've donated 500,000 pairs of socks to vulnerable people in the UK, Europe, and also Ukraine. And now you've expanded into the US, which is where you're talking to us from today. As a long-time supporter of Made by Dyslexia, you've said, although I was always bottom of the class, I excelled at creative things outside school. I've realised my dyslexic thinking is behind Stand4 Socks' success. Josh, welcome. It's amazing to have you with us today.
Amazing introduction. Great research. Thanks for
Well, we know each other well, don't we? You've been to lots of our events and we've chatted on many occasions. So we're great fans of what you do. And we all have Stand4 Socks, Made by Dyslexia socks too. Josh, tell us more about your dyslexic thinking and why you think it helps you to do what you do.
Yeah, I honestly, I don't know what age it was, maybe sort of 19, 20. I suddenly realized it wasn't the disability that I'd always thought it was at school. And that it really is kind of my superpower. And it was always there, kind of the impact it has on creativity of how I kind of connect the dots and see things differently. But it kind of took a while to really lean into that and, yeah, ignore the kind of spelling, the reading, writing, the slower things that I might not do and really lean into, what it allows me to do. And yeah, it's honestly incredible for creativity and strategy, which is what I do a lot of today.
And 40% of entrepreneurs are dyslexic. We know that there are 5 main reasons why dyslexics make brilliant entrepreneurs. I think probably you've got all of them, but I'll list them. One is that dyslexics think differently, the dyslexic thinking skill of imagining. Secondly, dyslexics see the big picture and we keep it simple. Thirdly, dyslexics are great explainers and great storytellers. 4 is dyslexics are passionate and curious. And 5 is dyslexics are people, great at building teams. Is there anything or any of those particularly that you think you excel at or really lean into in the business that you do?
Yeah, I think initially would always be the creativity. So, most of the socks have always been designed by me. More from we couldn't afford to pay anyone to do them in the early days, so I had to learn that skill. But kind of realizing the kind of creative eye and how, something that I think is quite easy to do of designing socks maybe and on Illustrator and these skills I've learned, you kind of take for granted when you maybe pass it to another member in the team and they don't see things necessarily as easily as maybe you do. And that's kind of where you then realize it's kind of different. But I think mainly it's the kind of connecting the dots. And, for us, it's connecting socks and homelessness and e-commerce strategy with digital marketing. And all these things seem quite obvious, I think, looking back. But it's kind of how I just see it, for me, just very clearly and almost get frustrated when I'm trying to explain to other people and I'm going, this is obvious. And they're going, I don't see it like that, and I have to kind of break it down and how and why I think I see things a certain way. So, no, I agree with all of those, but certainly, yeah, the creativity and connecting the dots mainly.
Are any of your team members dyslexic?
Very good question. No, I don't think so. We try and get a broad range of skills. So, we're quite a small team, obviously, but where I'm, very good at the creativity, the strategy, and that stuff. My main kind of mentor and a lot of our team are very good in the detail and operations. So they kind of counteract where I'm good at my weaknesses. Just kind of what we try and hire for and build a team around as much as we can. Obviously, different roles and different responsibilities though.
Yeah, it's that skills-based hiring and making sure you've got the best people for the job, which I think when you're dyslexic, it is all about delegating the things you're not good at and bringing people in to counteract those and really leaning into your strengths. Tell me about Stand4 Socks. I mean, why Stand4 Socks? It's an amazing concept, and you do amazing work. How did that come about?
Kind of been an interesting journey because I always get asked, how do you start a sock company? Or why did you go start a sock company?
And give half of them away.
Exactly, yeah. And, always been entrepreneurial through school. Actually, always getting in trouble, different business ideas. Luckily never expelled, but kind of probably on the verge of that quite a lot. And, I left school voted the most likely to end up a millionaire or in prison. So neither's happened yet. But yeah, it was kind of that kind of the kid in school, who was either selling sweets or buying stuff online to sell in school, or would always just kind of see a problem and could see a solution of, one of my main businesses back when I was at school was club nights. And I kind of saw this problem that young people didn't have anything to do in holidays and they couldn't go to the cinema or the park as much as they wanted. They couldn't go out drinking or to the bars or nightclubs where they wanted to go. And if they were under 18, under 18 nights were full of 12, 13-year-olds. So if you're 15, 16, you probably don't really want to be there. And we kind of just saw this idea of going, well, let's get a nightclub which has multiple rooms and work with the council to go, well, these rooms have alcohol in and has wristbands and it's, ID checked, and these rooms aren't. And you can mix all these different people in one venue. And, it's hugely successful. We shut down Ipswich Town Centre, closed McDonald's. I think the police didn't expect how popular we were going to be, but, influencer marketing and stuff like that back then. So, I'd kind of always done those sort of things. And was say very discouraged from being an entrepreneur. I remember being with the police and council after this night, and I was getting, all kinds of trouble about what went wrong. And I was going, but we were promoting it and created it. We weren't in charge of security and operations. But then I went to university and went to an entrepreneur accelerator after university, which was probably the first time in my life I was encouraged to be an entrepreneur. Which is an odd thing. And I say that's like 21 years old, and surrounded by like-minded people, and go, actually, this isn't a bad thing. You don't need to feel guilty about it. You don't need to be in trouble for being entrepreneurial. With friends over a beer, I sort of came out with this quote of, imagine if socks could change the world. And it was always sort of an off the cuff kind of joke comment. And I always say 5, 6 beers later, it became a lot better idea. But it was this idea that, everyone buys socks and socks are typically dull, poorly made, afterthought. And if we could give every single pair of socks a social purpose and make better quality socks, is it a crazy idea to think socks could change the world? And at that time, Tom's Shoes was very big with the buy one, give one model. The Livestrong rubber wristbands had been around, where, people went from not wearing rubber on their wristbands to suddenly wearing it and showing, what causes they wanted to support. Great kind of fundraising for the charities and showing a statement of what causes matter to you. But, at the end of the day, it's plastic and wasn't probably the best. So we sort of thought, well, let's take a product that pretty much most of us wear every single day and attach a social impact. And I'll say the rest is history, but that's where Stand4 Socks started back in 2014. And we've evolved a little bit over the years, but yeah, this idea that, let's make the best pair of socks in the world and support good causes around the world.
And I think what's really fascinating about that is that you just didn't make a pair of socks to give away. You actually really thought about the homeless people and the vulnerable people who needed the socks. What did they actually need? Because you made them thicker, didn't you? And you made them more comfortable, and you put stuff in to make sure that they don't make your feet stinky. So that's not just making socks. It was really thinking about the socks.
The homeless thing came around, about a year and a half after launching. We'd been supporting all the United Nations global goals and having all these great social impacts around the world, but we're kind of ignoring a cause on our doorstep, literally. And it was one Christmas, we had one design that basically completely flopped. And I think I was just fed up with, fed up with the business and fed up with this tough Christmas period we'd had. And I was like, let's just get rid of these socks and do some good. And took them to a local homeless shelter. And the kind of the reaction was just like the penny dropping. It was like the third or fourth shelter I went and dropped, 100 pairs of socks at each. And they're saying, do you realize socks are one of the most requested items we get? No one ever donates socks. They're a wear through item. You wear them until they get holes in them and then you throw them away. But, if you're homeless on the street, walking more than the average person, reportedly up to 10 miles a day, you don't have the benefit of, nice clean socks every day, leads to a number of very serious foot health issues and trench foot, which most of us in our day-to-days take, for granted. And that's kind of, when the penny dropped. So then when we were like, right, we need to donate socks. Well, these socks were made for consumer market and very fashionable and designer colors and bright stuff. but let's challenge, what is possible for, the needs of homeless people. And it was just kind of just kept pushing it. It was like, right, hardware in colors, don't want holes in the toes because it needs to be worn more often, and need to support the arch. And we basically started to look at, well, hiking socks are the best hard wearing socks. So let's start with that and then go back to our factory and go, right, we want to make this, but also for homeless people. And that's when, naturally antibacterial materials started to come into it. And yeah, I'll still say today they are the greatest socks ever made for homeless people in the world. Probably the most innovative sock we've ever created. But, it was just kind of challenging that norm and thinking of the problem and trying to solve it to the best of our ability. And we still evolve it today with changing needs.
It's dyslexic thinking right there. Tell me about Ukraine, because you've been supplying socks to Ukraine, haven't you?
Yes, and it hasn't been straightforward, but it's been again just seeing a problem. When it was all starting, our name is Stand4 Socks, and it's the idea of showing what you stand for your feet. So we very quickly we did the same in the pandemic. We launched a Stand for Health Heroes, and so we launched a Stand for Ukraine sock. Just very simple design, threw it out there, sold way more than we expected, which is a great, response from our customers. And it was a not-for-profit kind of sock. And we almost had the second problem. We go, right, we need to get socks into Ukraine at the start of the war when the borders are closing. How do we get socks physically in? So the first wave was, right, we can get them to Poland and we can get them to refugees who have fled Ukraine, a lot of women and children at first. It was a lot more fluffy socks and kids socks we were getting to there. And then what we've now kind of managed to craft is a kind of very unique supply chain, basically, of lorries coming out of Ukraine and Poland that come to the UK, but they're going back pretty much half empty or empty. So we can get them to the Polish border, and then we can get them from the Polish border deep into Ukraine. Which, yeah, when I talk about it like that, I think actually it's quite crazy of how we're able to kind of make that happen. But I think it was just, again, how do we do it? It's not call up DHL and go, right, DHL, I want to get some socks into Kiev. Where are the gaps in these supply chains? We know the challenges and how can we get our socks there? And, we work with some fantastic charities and volunteer groups to make that happen.
And I think, is it 150,000 pairs of socks that you supply to them now, or is it growing?
It's growing, yeah. It's, I think, 150,000 committed now into various different parts, yeah.
Well, that's an incredible thing to do. And tell me about this. I read something about when you first set up and you'd found a supplier in Turkey you wanted to work with, but they would only do a very big run. And somehow you managed to persuade them to work with you.
Yeah, somehow. And it was probably people talk about luck in entrepreneurship. I think it was lucky, but it was trying everything and kind of resilience and again, not giving up. But yeah, basically in socks, minimum, machines, minimum orders are very high from every stage of the supply chain. It's getting the yarn. Those suppliers are minimums, 40 kilos of a color. And then machine setup times and costs. So it's still something we're able to kind of do today of kind of really challenging that norm. But basically, we got a really good factory. I'd met them in London. They're Turkish, family owned, great, very, very big factory, but very kind of, I'd say kind of ethical and kind of have the right mindset of how we approach things. And I met them probably 8 times until I think they agreed to work with me. I think the funny thing was for 2 years, I said I was running a sock company and we had a website, but we didn't have any physical socks. So everyone knew I was running this sock company and it was a bit awkward. We didn't have any socks. So anyway, this factory, I went to a few more trade shows in Istanbul, and I think yeah, the eighth or ninth time, different brothers I'd been kind of meeting with every time I was there for coffee, and they eventually invited me for dinner and kind of really started to hear our story of what we were trying to do. Because the first funny time we met them, it was, which brand are you from? And I'm like, oh, Stand4 Socks. And they're like, who's that? We've never heard of them. I'm going, yeah, because you haven't got any socks. Like out there, they always think, are you from Top Man? Are you from H&M? Which big brand? You're a young guy. You clearly you're a buyer for a big brand. And we're like, no, I'm trying to start a sock company. So yeah, they kind of eventually agreed. And yeah, minimum orders in socks is sort of 5,000 pairs per color typically. So we were like, right, that's what it is. Tried as hard as we could to push it. Was trying to get a bank loan and was going to buy 15,000 pairs, 5,000 blue, 5,000 black, and 5,000 green or something. And you come to our website, we have 3 designs only, we have hundreds or thousands of them in a warehouse. Unfortunately, they basically just said like, you're gonna fail, but you need to like test the market, you need to learn. So they basically said, look, let's do 200 pairs per design. Let's launch 20, 30 designs, and you'll work out what sells, what doesn't sell, and we can go from there. And probably the best thing, because we would have made that first order, and we probably wouldn't be around today if we had, because our first designs were very bad. I was very proud of the first product we put out there, but looking back, it was awful. The packaging, the messaging, everything was awful to what we're doing nowadays. So yeah, fantastic relationship with them, and they're at my wedding, and they're out here in New York recently, and yeah, we're still their smallest customer, but I think we're one of their favorite. And yeah, we're so thankful for them. And again, yeah, building those partnerships and relationships, which is pretty much critical, I think, to our success. But it's been knocking on a lot of shut doors for a while, I think, to make it happen.
I think that's such an important part of any entrepreneurial journey, is building those relationships and keeping at it. And eventually you can usually persuade people to do what you want them to do, because they kind of really understand your passion and clearly believed in you to make that happen. It's great they're still working with you. That's really special.
Yeah, just on that, I mean, I always say the answer's already no, so you might as well ask the question. And I think you'll know, Kate, with some things I've probably asked you over the years where I'm like, yeah, I want to speak, Branson, or we want to do this. And it's like, the answer's already no. So it's not being cheeky, I think. It's just being asked the question and, see what can happen. And it's, I don't know, resilience or whatever, you use the word, but it's like, yeah, just trying your best and, not being disheartened when you get a no or no reply, it's normal.
Yeah, it's just keeping asking and asking and asking. Another thing you touched on, which is something that I know almost every entrepreneur I've ever spoken to does this, and I know it's something that Richard talks about doing. It's that thing of talking ahead of yourself. You have to have a vision, and you have to see it in your mind, and then you have to persuade everybody that that's already happening, and it's something that you're really doing. He talks famously about many, many, many years ago, he set up Virgin Galactic as a company and started saying to everybody, I'm going to be the first passenger carrier into space. And then lots of people came to him with ideas of how you could do it. And, that's kind of how things come together, very much like you with your amazing suppliers doing things for you that they didn't originally say that they could do. So it's resilience and having that imagination, isn't it?
100%, yeah.
And tell me about the B Corp. I believe that you have recently become a B Corp company, and also that you scored twice as highly as most companies on their metrics. How important is it for you to have a sustainable business, and why do you think it's important for companies to be sustainable?
Yeah, I think B Corp's a funny one because we kind of always been doing that from day one. So it was kind of one of those, well, we might as well get the accreditation because, B Corp, and we're a social enterprise as well, but it looks at all aspects of the business, how your employees and your suppliers and your environmental impact, every kind of aspect of business. And yeah, you get a score out of, I think top score is 250, but the average business is 50. And to be a B Corp, you have to be above 80. We're 114.5, which I think, well, and I know because I'm very proud of it. We're the highest stock B Corp in the world currently, and we're kind of setting the bar, and I'm sure others are going to catch us up, and we're going to keep pushing that, the norms of kind of business for good. But yeah, it's vital. I think it's a funny one, again, use the millennial term, but it's like, when I set up the business, it was never a should we do this because we should. It was just like, why wouldn't we do this? Like, why wouldn't we make socks in the most sustainable way? And why won't we use materials and labor and supply chain and routes that are the best? And it's that, challenging the norm. It was others weren't doing it, so it doesn't mean that we just follow what everyone else is doing. Like, let's do it differently. And there's various different programs we now do. Obviously, our donation socks, but we have a recycling sock program where we take a lot of our excess yarn. That's a problem in the factory, and we just reuse that into design. So every Christmas, we launch a collection of socks that is made out of our production that season of all the used up yarns. And we take other socks where and materials that haven't been used by other. So we basically work, again, great relationship with our factory. We work out where the waste is in their whole supply chain and how do we turn it into good. And there's various other very exciting things we're working on at the moment in that kind of space.
And we've touched a little bit on resilience and bouncing back from hurdles. Can we touch a little bit on failure? I mean, we know that dyslexics are very good at failing. We're also very good at bouncing back from failure. And being able to fail fast is a really, really important part of being an entrepreneur. Can you give us some examples of when things haven't quite gone the way you've wanted them to go and how you've recovered from that?
I always hate the word failure, but I get it as a word, but it's the, it's like steps, I look at it that way. It's like setbacks, but it's not going backwards. It's just a flatlining to get up to the next level. And, through school was always bottom of the class. I used to get it where the teachers would come around with the marks, and it would just eventually get to me and they'll be like, see you after the class. And I was like, wow, bottom of the class, but it never really bothered me, but it got to a point where I think, parents and friends and teachers had so low expectations of me at school, it almost became a bit of a motivator for me and my biggest driver to go, well, you don't have much expectation, which is great. I have no pressure, but I'm going to show you all like what I can do, which has already helped. And I think diagnosed with dyslexia officially at age 8. And I think that summer I literally met Richard Branson very briefly at one of his Virgin parties he used to do. And it was probably one of the biggest changing moments of my life because it was like, I'm really bad at school, get bullied for spelling things wrong and teased, and I've got 3 brothers and I've got like, and they're very academic, and it's like, oh, I'm not good at this, but look at this man who's doing all this fantastic stuff, and I could do that, and I could be an entrepreneur, and he's also dyslexic, so it was just that kind of connecting the dots of going, I'm failing in that sense at school, but I'm not about school. School is just getting me through to where I need to get to next, and that's kind of been the biggest thing. But no, through the business, like failing, like honestly, many times. Never at the time, you never make a bad decision on purpose, but so many decisions we've made at the time seemed great. Even with our expansion to the US, like we thought, we'll take the strategy that worked in the UK because that's proven and just apply it to the US. And we assume the market's quite similar, but that was strategy that we employed in the UK 5 years ago, and it's not worked as well here. And we're just adapting and rolling with it. Our first ever packaging, I thought it was a really smart idea to really creative at the time. I thought we're called Stand4, and let's make the 4 in the A, so it's like ST4ND as our logo. And we put that on all our first socks, and we didn't put anywhere on the packaging about the buy one give one or what social impact. And we were like, so our whole point is this, our messaging and everything says that. And what we realized is most of our buyers were gifting buyers, and they were giving it away of going, well, what is this product? And various things like that. And also just like with the causes we supported early on, it was not giving customers any choice. It was like, you want to support child mortality, you buy the baby blue sock, and you want to support gender equality, you buy the pink and blue sock. And what we realized when I did some pop-up markets a few years in of why is my website not going crazy and why is everyone not buying this, it was doing face-to-face markets. We realized like customers were saying to us, "I really want to support this cause, but I like this design," or my, granddad is a Man City fan and he wants this design, but he cares more about this. And that's when we kind of just realized again, the failure was like our messaging was really wrong and complicated, but we did it with the right intentions and, just listen to feedback, not always, but most of the time, listen to the kind of feedback and the data and adapt to it. But also at times stick to what you think is the right thing to do.
And you touched a lot there on your school days, and how they made you feel. What do you think your 7-year-old self would think about what you're doing now?
I think you're living in New York and selling socks for a living. Like, how is that even possible? I mean, the funny thing I always say with my grandma's 98 now, bless her. And when I said I was going to sell socks on the internet, like, I mean, even nowadays, we've done Dragon's Den and it's built a business now and it's still just going like, you sell socks on the internet, or you're still doing that thing selling socks on the internet. To her generation, it's crazy. And I think for 7-year-old me would have also thought like, who's going to buy socks on the internet? But no, definitely very proud. And, I went back to my school. I do talks and stuff there now. And I love going back there and just kind of sharing my experience.
So, if you had one piece of advice for kids who are struggling at school, what would that be?
I say, the initial thought was like, don't care. As in like, don't worry about it. And that's what I mean by it. It's like, obviously it's the Einstein quote about a fish climbing a tree, thinking it's fake. But, I always resonate with that. It's like the school system, it's probably changed so much, obviously, since when I was there, but it just wasn't set up there was a bit of art and a bit of design, but it was really about the maths and the sciences. And it wasn't set up for people like me. And I don't criticize it for that. It's just, I didn't fit into that. So I think, as much as you can realize school is just a part of your life, and enjoy the friendships, enjoy sport or whatever else you're interested in, because it's not going to be forever. And I leaned into my entrepreneurship at school. I said I was always getting in trouble. I was doing what I was good at, coming into school and getting told off for it, but I still kept doing it. The best one was I worked at a pet supply shop that had no pets, and it was just carrying sacks of food to people's cars, like horse feed and dog food. I think it was like £2.50 an hour, and I was like probably 12 at the time. And I remember just going onto eBay and going, I'm going to buy some stuff from China and I'm going to sell it. And I remember a couple of Sunday nights just sat watching Top Gear with my mum, and I was like, I've just made 500 quid. And she's just like, what do you mean? I was like, yeah, I've just sold all this stuff. I've made £500. She's like, she's not going to work at the pet shop next week for 20 quid. I'm like, no, like I could do this other stuff. So I think, yeah, just embrace what you are good at and what you enjoy, as with anything in life.
And for entrepreneurs, budding entrepreneurs who are thinking of starting their own business, what would your top tips be for them?
Top three tips would be, don't let other people's opinions influence you too much. I think, you know, unless you're surrounded by other entrepreneurs, most people are in corporate jobs or very different parts of your life. However, they will want to give you a lot of advice on what you're doing. Listen to advice, but don't take it as the gospel. I think that's always been a kind of a key thing for us. I think do what you frankly enjoy. I was doing an app idea. I didn't enjoy it. I wasn't that motivated and passionate about it. I'd always liked fun, colourful socks. I like the creativity. I also pretty much like the randomness of it. So find what you're passionate about, because frankly, it's going to be very, very hard, and it still is. Different challenges we had years ago are different to the challenges we have today, and different to the challenges we're going to have in a couple of years. But definitely find something you're really passionate about. And I think lastly, it's it's a hard one. I think again, it's probably go back to the perception one, but a lot of people don't follow creative projects because they feel they have to be really successful or it's a failure. And for that, like we have it where I quite like it. I get called the Richard Branson of socks amongst friends and stuff. They're like, "Oh, it's the Richard Branson of socks," and "Oh, have you made your millions yet?" And it's like the bar for people in entrepreneurship or creative stuff is the expectation. Unless you make it really successful, you're a failure. So, I think start something you're passionate about and enjoy, and don't worry about the destination. Just enjoy the journey.
Amazing, amazing. And I have one last question for you. Where do you think your dyslexic thinking is going to take you next? What's your biggest, boldest dream?
The first thing, and it sounds a bit random, I think, as a dyslexic, I want to write a book. And I don't know what about, and I don't care if I sell any copies. I think just from like me as a school kid, really bad at writing, really bad at spelling, just as a dyslexic to put a book out there. If two people buy it, I don't mind. It's like, I want to put a book out there. So I think that's one of my kind of personal ones. And I think more broadly, and it's great, obviously, with the work made by Dyslexia and Richard Branson and all you guys are doing, it's really showcasing, and it's changed so much, I think, in the last few years and the great work you've done, but showcasing dyslexic as this superpower, the LinkedIn and stuff like this, where it's going, it is actually a skill set. It's not a disability. And, as much as I can support that, the better. It took me till 2021 to really embrace it and talk about it positively than negatively. Um, and it's been, even I think the thing I have in my footer actually, from you guys, the amount of emails I get back saying, "Oh, my son's dyslexic," or "My niece is dyslexic," and "Oh, I love what you're doing and your story and how you're like embracing it." So any way that I can support that, is probably key. And I think in 10, 20 years time, for the traction you guys are making, I think for where it's going, it's going to be phenomenal. And any way I can support, the better.
Amazing. So have you got expect creative thinking and creative spelling as your email footer?
I do, yeah. Honestly, 10, 20% reply to it. Yeah. And the conversation it sparks, and it's just phenomenal to have it in there. And it's such a simple thing, it's not, it's there, and people notice it. And yeah, you're talking about doing custom socks for a big company, and you're talking about dyslexia for 4 or 5 emails, and it's great. You would never have been doing that years ago. I don't think it's easy.
Oh, it's brilliant. Well, that's how we'll change the world, by every dyslexic owning their dyslexia and telling the world that we're brilliant thinkers and we just need to accept it and stop seeing the negatives. Josh, we were so excited to have Made by Dyslexia socks, which anybody who was at the World Dyslexia Assembly in New York last year will have noticed lots of the speakers were wearing them. I don't have mine to hand. Have you got some you could hold up?
I do, yeah. Here they are.
Yeah, they're absolutely awesome, aren't they? So anybody who wants to buy a pair of Made by Dyslexia socks, you can find them on Stand4 Socks, and we'll put them in the link to the podcast as well. But you'll be giving money to Made by Dyslexia as well as giving socks to the needy. So that would be incredible. Thank you so much, Josh. It's been really, really wonderful chatting to you, and I look forward to reading your book when it comes out.
Hopefully, yeah. No, thanks a lot for having me.
This podcast is sponsored by Microsoft, who, like us, are passionate about empowering dyslexic thinking. Their free learning accelerator tools like Reading Progress and Reading Coach help dyslexic thinkers thrive. Find out more by clicking the Microsoft link in the podcast notes. And if you'd like to find out more about what dyslexic thinking skills are and how to recognise them in schools, at work, or at home, you can take our free training now. Empowering Dyslexic Thinking in Schools, available on Microsoft Learn, and Empowering Dyslexic Thinking at Work, available on LinkedIn Learning. And please subscribe so you don't miss out on future lessons in dyslexic thinking.